At Myron Construction, our passionate team members rally together every day to create meaningful connections and capture what truly matters. Within our offices and out on our project sites, Myron's strong culture and core values permeate everything we do and guide our approach to serving our clients, our communities, and each other. Together, we're building excellence.
Hello, I'm Christy Fisher, President of Kirkwood Community College. We're proud to once again partner with the Iowa Ideas Conference. I hope you walk away with several new ideas and valuable partnerships. The same kind of partnerships Kirkwood has with regional employers, industry leaders, and communities, where we help build a workforce pipeline that strengthens our economy and prepares Iowans for the future. Enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Iowa Ideas. This is our 9th year of Iowa Ideas, an event that explores topics that are important to Iowans. The Gazette would like to give a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest, and Myron Construction and Kirkwood Community College for their support of this event, ensuring it remains free to all attendees. Today, we will be discussing apprenticeships and career paths. My name is Grace King, and I'm the K-12 education reporter at the Gazette. Today, I am joined by our panelists, Tara Traster, Career and Technical Education Content Lead for the Cedar Rapids Community School District, Christy Black, Executive Dean at Kirkwood Community College, Doug Wheeler, Superintendent of the College Community School District, and hopefully Georgia Van Gundy, Deputy Director at Iowa Workforce Development, who is just having some issues connecting with us here today, I think. But thank you all for being here today. Our audience can submit questions to our panel by entering them into the Q&A box or the chat, and we will work them into our conversations. Today, we'll be talking about how schools are embracing college and career-connected education. There's a higher demand for registered apprenticeships, and high school students and graduates are pursuing this form of education to gain experience in an industry before starting their careers. What industries have registered apprenticeships? What are the requirements? Is there a role that AI will play in the future of many of these careers? So let's talk about that. Where do apprenticeships fit into state-required work-based learning experiences for Iowa students? Tara, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. So when we are thinking of those state requirements and what counts as one of our reportable work-based learning opportunities, apprenticeships is one of those. And what we would want to emphasize is for students that it's a pathway. And you're going to hear this from Doug and Christy also. We know that a student is not ready just to jump into a long-term paid training program. And so by having career exposure throughout really pre-K 12 to those opportunities and through guest speakers and STEM institutes and financial literacy events, and then using the career information systems, and then going into job shadows and then internships, and then the coursework that goes along to build into a student being ready for apprenticeship. So it's more than just a, hey, I think I'm interested in this. It's really being deliberate about those conversations with students, with families of what is available, and then what are those opportunities, be it in apprenticeship programming, and then all of the other opportunities.
Doug, would you like to expand on that? How has the Prairie School District, College Community School District engaged in work-based learning experiences for students?
Yeah, we've had a longstanding partnership actually with Workplace Learning Connections through Kirkwood, which has provided anything ranging from job shadows to on-site career fairs for a number of years. But really for the last 4 or 5 years, we've really been focusing on developing pathways to make sure that students get exposure to that area before they make a decision. One of my common sayings is it's very difficult to dream about something you've never seen. So a lot of our work is to get students outside of what they would normally see. And then I think really the apprenticeship piece fits very tightly into our goals of being responsive to our community, because obviously in order to engage in an apprenticeship, you have to have a partnership with an industry or business within the community. And so that really fits in very well with our goal to be more connected and more service oriented towards producing the type of skills that where students can see themselves as a fit here in Cedar Rapids and if not in Iowa. So yeah, that's how I think how I would expand upon that. We're very excited actually for the requirement to be maybe more recognized in terms of a state profile of our school. It's work that we've been doing for a long time. It's very responsive work. It's work that I know our community has wanted for a number of years. And it's great to also see that recognized alongside, the very important work of making sure that students have literacy and numeracy skills.
Christy, could you talk about what an apprenticeship is, what's kind of required for it to be considered an apprenticeship, and then are there prerequisites that students have to participate in before apprenticing?
Sure, I can kind of get us started, and then Georgia can maybe fill in any of the gaps that I may have missed. In order to have an apprenticeship program, you need to have employers that are willing to engage in the opportunity and obviously have students that are interested. And so there are a few different parts to the apprenticeship program. So students are required to do a certain amount of related training. So there is an educational piece to the apprenticeship program, but then obviously one of the highlights then is getting the students hired and employed by a local employer. And within that process, those students are paired up with a mentor within that employer partner that is part of the apprenticeship program. And so those are kind of the high level pieces of it. I don't know that there's specifically prerequisites. There's certainly some things that students can do to help prepare. So some of the things that Tara mentioned and Doug mentioned about getting students involved with things like job shadows and other ways of getting in front of employers to help them be prepared. Apprenticeships are really sort of at that higher level of the continuum of work-based learning. And so there's a lot of things students can do to help be prepared to be successful with an employer ahead of that. But Georgia, do you want to jump into and talk about some of the other details?
Well, actually, you hit, most of them, and obviously our Iowa Office of Apprenticeship can talk about that. But a registered apprenticeship obviously is an employer-driven training pathway, and a skilled occupation, and it provides on-the-job training and classroom training, and then leads to portability skills that student can take. And as you mentioned, it's just part of a continuum of work-based learning. So there's other opportunities under work-based learning, whether it's sustained project-based learning in partnership with an employer, simulated work experiences, qualified pre-apprenticeship, student learning, internships, and then apprenticeships. So it's just one of those opportunities that a student can participate in for work-based learning.
Apprenticeships have been around for a long time, but when did it start to become more common to engage high school students in these opportunities? Georgia, I don't know if you want to start talking about that.
Yep.
And then...
Yep, I can say that. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say exactly, when the high school age students became more engaged, but I would say within the last decade, we've seen a more targeted effort to engage students and grow registered apprenticeships in high schools. And I'm not sure if that, coincides with, I think we had a really tight workforce market where employers were really looking at what are different opportunities for them to really start building those pipelines and understanding about working with high school students through registered apprenticeship. And that's one way to do it. I would also say that it also kind of correlated at that time with an increase in high school engagement related to the decrease in skilled workers throughout the workforce. So there's been really a concentrated effort, like I mentioned, to have employers really be active and connecting with high school students early to help them understand what those jobs look like and how they can align with a registered apprenticeship and move into that position.
If I could add just another point there, this movement of work-based learning and the apprenticeship programs for high school students, it really has allowed us to hit home that idea of the need for multiple pathways for students. And so not all jobs require a 2-year or 4-year degree after high school, but they do need some form of training. And so the onset of the registered apprenticeship programs for high school students has really kind of opened up another very valuable pathway option for some of our high school students.
Tara, Doug, would you like to talk about what that looks like in your school districts?
Yeah, I think engagement is the big piece, right? And I think that, Christy, you hit upon this. One of the things that we've been working to do is elevate other opportunities for learning and training beyond high school that may not lead to a 4-year degree, to elevate those to students that want to pursue them as feeling as valuable within our school system as those students that are pursuing the 4-year degree. We're not trying to diminish students, pursuing 4-year degrees, but what we're really focused in on is trying to create learners, right? And wherever a student goes, if they're going to have the lifestyle that they want and the job that they want, they're going to have to continue to learn, right? And so I think that the last decade, I would say, we've really been focusing on what are the other things that students can learn about beyond our walls, to make sure that they can secure those jobs. And so for us, we have Career Academy and Pathway programming. So we, and the goal of that program, and it looks a little different based on where the student's going, right? Whether they're going into culinary or whether they're going with ag, is a sequence course, a sequence set of classes that they would take to learn about the industry enough to have that initial toe dip. And then also leading into opportunities in that junior and senior year for job shadows, internships, but then also pursuing apprenticeships if it's appropriate to that student's trajectory, right? And so that's kind of how we've laid things out. We want to start talking to students about this early, and then the question becomes how early, right? Where do we start this process? And what we've chosen to do is really hone in on looking at exploring those things at the middle school level, and then offering really strategic opportunities starting as a freshman to receive a sequence of courses that gives them the idea of whether they're interested in this. And that also helps our employers with a base set of knowledge that they know what our students are coming to them with. And I think that's a challenge that as schools we need to embrace, is to be able to explain to employers these are the skills they have coming in, and they're building on those skills. We're not starting from scratch.
Much of what Doug, I'm kind of a ditto with all of that. Just adding within our career and technical education classes have operated with their sequential coursework. But where I have found and heard from the teachers and students is that application of their learning. And so you're taking a math class, and then within any of their engineering or culinary, that they're applying those. And so for some, that's a different way of learning that shows them success that they may not have in that traditional sit and get if it's a math, but that application of learning. And then with all of our programs, and it's going to be the same. So what I'm talking about is the same across districts, is that you have your advisory group, and your advisory group is going to help identify what skills, what industry recognized credentials they value. And so then as a school, we're not operating in isolation, that we are ensuring that what we're teaching students, our teachers know they've worked with industry, or some of them, former industry members. And then they also have helped make that connection of here's equipment, or here's a credential, or here's software. And so it's really part of that, as Doug described it, that service to the community. And so that's where, like, that whole big picture.
Tara, I don't know if you want to talk about how Cedar Rapids is launching the Pathways program, trying to streamline or, I don't know, better sequentialize some of these courses you're talking about.
Yeah, so many of the programs that we are looking at formalizing into those academies and pathways have existed in the buildings. But with 3 traditional high schools, a magnet high school, well, 3 magnet high schools now, and then the Iowa Big program, and then City View, and our alternative school, I think some things have just gotten lost, that like these are programs we're offering. And so we are branching out based on what community has said are needed. But then some of those ones are ones that we have offered. So 12 plus years we've offered the Project Lead the Way aerospace. We've managed to have awesome instructors, and so expanding upon that, but then a strong automotive program that we work closely with Kirkwood. But then in our construction right now, our automotive instructors actually housed at our transportation department. And so students that have demonstrated proficiency are working with one of our bus mechanics. And so just as we look at what we're offering our families, does it make sense? And so when a parent student gets a program of study and it's 40 plus pages, and it's like, how does this connect? Being able to clearly identify how it connects, but then also what are those levels of education and or training to get you where you would want to be? And again, it also goes back to what Doug said too, like what do they want for their life? Like, and what is that passion? And then how can you balance those?
I would add to that that's the same kind of conversations that we're having in terms of programs that we've had for a number of years, looking at them in terms of a sequence. And 3 years ago, we completely redid our course guide for that purpose, because again, I'm sure many people out there will remember getting the course guide in college or in high school, and it's like 300 pages of listed courses. And that's not super helpful sometimes to see, from 9th grade, what am I going to be doing in 11th grade, and how can I take those classes if I want to have an apprenticeship, or if I want to have a deep workplace learning experience in that junior or senior year.
Christy, how does Kirkwood work with our area school districts to offer more of these programs?
Yeah, we do partner in a variety of ways. Doug mentioned earlier, one of our programs at Kirkwood is called the Workplace Learning Connection. And so that is intermediary service that really sort of connects students to employers, and they really kind of serve as that one point of contact when we've got 32 plus high schools in our region. It becomes hard for industries and employers to have multiple people, multiple districts contacting them for things like job shadows, internships, speakers. And so the Workplace Learning Connection helps make those connections on behalf of all of the schools within the region. So that's a great service that we partner with our schools and our employers on. We also have a very robust concurrent enrollment program that has been growing over the last several years. And within that, we work with our CTE teachers within the walls of the high school to allow them opportunities. So Doug and Tara talked about their sequence of classes. And in many times we can work with the schools to also embed concurrent enrollment opportunities within their pathways. Again, just to help students get started, get a taste of that college level coursework, help them figure out, is this what I really want to do in my future? So we work closely with the schools in that way. And then we do have 4 regional centers throughout our 7-county service area where school districts will send students for part of the day to one of our Career Academy programs, which does build on the work that's offered within the walls of the high school. It allows students to go into a little bit more in-depth concurrent enrollment programming in a specific career area. And we have worked in collaboration with Grantwood and our school districts to establish a registered apprenticeship program in nurse aid. We also have, we've worked closely together to establish a registered apprenticeship program for welding as well. So it takes a village in the work we do. And so we're really fortunate in this region that we have such strong partners with like Iowa Workforce Development, the school districts, area employers. It seems like we're all really working hard at helping students get on a path for success.
Yeah, I mean, some of these programs are absolutely remarkable. You think about high school students working in healthcare. What does that look like in practice? Are they ready for a world of work like that?
I could say that some of the certification programs that build in that work-based learning piece, for example, we 3 years ago started offering the certified nursing assistant here with the support of Kirkwood. That opportunity for those 30 hours that they spend with patients is invaluable for them to determine, is this the path that I want to go on? Am I still interested in healthcare, but I want to do something else? But also giving them a leg up where in terms of their colleagues or their peers going out to get a part-time job when they go beyond high school or even in high school, and they can make a certain amount of money more because they've got a certification versus their peers. That helps them also pay for their schooling.
Do industries have time to work with high school students at this level? Are they holding their hand, teaching them like maybe we would think of a classroom? What does that look like?
For us, what we've seen with our apprentice, and again, this is, I think there's a lot of opportunity to expand apprenticeships, and I don't think it's a gap in our willingness or in industry's willingness. We need to find out how to make this smoother so that we can get more apprentices, because we've been working on getting registered apprentices for a number of years. We've had one this past year, and it was very successful. And so a lot of that apprentices training was kind of on the job training, but they were looking for other sets of skills, that particular partner. In fact, we were told by that partner that this individual possessed a lot of other skills beyond just the specific welding required. And that's why they were chosen for the apprenticeship. So we were really proud of that as well, to understand that there's other skills that employers are looking for, such as communication, being able to resolve conflicts, being able to work independently, and those types of things that students get to practice in our pathways and ultimately have that final game, so to speak, in those apprenticeships.
Grace, I apologize. Could you repeat that question? Because I'm still having technology issues.
You're good. Yes, I think when we imagine high school students going into the workplace, it can be kind of astounding sometimes. So are these high school students prepared to engage in this career learning? Do they need more hand-holding than maybe employers have the time for or are willing to give?
I think on the registered apprenticeship side, one of the things that we're looking at is how do you make an apprenticeship work well for a student in high school? So, usually a registered apprenticeship is anywhere from 2 to 4 years. They do become an employee of the company who's working with them. But I think, and we're looking at that. So luckily for us, we're now a state office of apprenticeship and not a federal office. So we have more flexibility in looking at different models. So we are looking at a different, more youth apprenticeship model that could make it more applicable for students. Now, students have a lot going on. They're engaged in a lot of different things. And so we feel, if you think about our customers, we're trying to look at how can we make those models work for both them and the employer at the end of the day. And I think, what's important in all of this is that we continue to get employers at the table. And that's one of the things that we've been working on, is how do we make sure we have employers at the table, to your kind of part of your question, to make sure that they feel comfortable with working with high school students and understanding, whether it's, an internship, whether it is an apprenticeship, whether it's, project-based learning that they're working on, but just really getting employers to engage with school districts, because I think school districts are doing a great job of putting together those opportunities and trying to align students, but you have to have the employers that are working on it as well.
What does that sound like for you guys? Tara, Doug, even Christy, does that sound like it could make it more accessible to more students? And are there enough employers there to meet the demand for the number of students who want to apprentice in our state?
So with what Georgia had spoke on, absolutely that interest in exploring more of that appropriate youth apprenticeship, because it is a long-term commitment for high school students who have high school, who have sports, who have life. And so we have found some of our certified nurse aid assistants are definitely more successful when they start as a junior and then able to follow them. But then those that maybe had joined as a senior, then I have been, following them for a couple of years after as they complete their 2,000 hours. So definitely that interest in seeing what that looks like. And it also just comes down to, in terms of, are there enough employers? I think finding the right fit, there absolutely are enough. And that's where it's both the school districts, actually multiple, right? School districts, community colleges, Iowa Workforce Development, and then the employers on how are we coming together and being clear on what we're looking for, what those expectations are, because then we can use them as school districts and help prepare our students.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. Our business community is very interested and active in working with us. 30 of them opened their doors for our teachers to tour in our pre-service this year. So I think it's really about like what is maybe finding those examples of best practices for them to see that, because I mean, obviously there's a commitment from the industry and they want to see it be successful as well. But they're also navigating staffing shortages, those types of things. What is the commitment on their end? And I think so it's finding those exemplars. And I think that's what will get more and more businesses comfortable with it, because I think there's definitely an interest, but I think there still can sometimes be some lack of clarity, at least from them on what it entails, right?
And I would chime in just to say, that's one of the things our work-based learning team is really working on, to your point, is giving some of those best practices, providing some models that can be more standardized for businesses to engage in, so that we do make it a little bit easier for them to engage, because it is great for them to learn about from other companies that are doing a great job. But again, what some of those barriers we're working on our team, on our side, to try to break those down so that businesses can engage better.
I think even teaching is moving into an apprenticeship model, or there are options to apprentice. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we have the teacher paraeducator registered apprenticeship that's out there right now that a number of school districts are working on. It's some funding that the governor put some funding toward that initiative, because again, she wanted to make sure, if you think about some of the areas in our workforce where we need to build it a little bit, and one of those was teachers. So and again, I think that people typically think of a registered apprenticeship potentially in the trades area or skilled area, but a lot of different industries and occupations can apply to an apprenticeship, and the teacher apprenticeship is one of the new ones that we have out there as a state that is being successful.
That's very cool. Does the economy impact apprenticeship opportunities, or how might that?
I'm probably going to have a different thought on this. One would say, first of all, an apprenticeship, the employer has to employ the individual. So they need to have jobs available in order to hire them. But I would also say that in the crisis time, when businesses just are saying, hey, I just need to hire 50 people. I don't have time to do or put in place an apprenticeship. I think during a slow time, it is an opportunity to try it if you haven't tried it before, just even with one person. So while you need to have the position to hire it, I do think it's a good time to try it when you're not in such an urgent situation hiring people, because it's going to start to create that pipeline for your future workforce growth.
I guess, Christy, you work with a lot of businesses. What do you see in that area?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what Georgia's pointing out. I think that in the way of like the nurse aid apprenticeship program that we have as an example, it continues to be a huge shortage in that field as well as nursing in general, and so we've been able to bring several employers on board. It's been a great fit and relationship between the employers and the students and the schools. And so the tides can turn a little bit, I think, with the economy. We were having a little bit of difficulty right now with getting more employers on board with the welding apprenticeship program. But again, we just kind of continue to make those connections with employers and try to help them understand how it will benefit their company in the long run.
Going back to demand, Doug and Tara, I don't know if you can talk about, are there more students in your classes than you can accommodate? Would you like to be able to offer more sections of these classes? What does that look like?
Doug, I think we would always want to be able to offer more classes of everything that we're talking about. But in terms of more students, it's really an approach of making certain that students are aware, right? How are we clear about it? And so that they know that it's an option, as opposed to thinking that 4 years is the only way, or it's only this. And so it comes down to helping the students see what those possibilities are. And so the best thing in the world would be to have more students and we have opportunities, because then we can talk to businesses and work with Kirkwood and Iowa Workforce Development to say, we have 30 students who have completed OSHA 10, their welding certification, like these industry recognized credentials, they're ready. How can we work together to fill that need?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's also educating families, parents and families, about opportunities and how different pathways can lead to high-paying jobs and student happiness, over the course of your life. I mean, I feel like now it's almost like we ask students. We used to kind of ask them, what do you want to do for a living, and now we ask them kind of what type of lifestyle do you want to live? Are you the type of person that wants to travel all over the place for where you're working? Are you someone who wants to stay, or do you want to raise a family? What is the type of career that's going to fit for the lifestyle you want to live, and that's going to result in happiness, right? And so I think that part of it's also working with our families, understanding how 2-year opportunities or apprentice positions or trade union training and those types of things can be beneficial to a student if that's the life they want to live, right? And so I think both having the students understand the opportunities and having families understand the opportunities is important. I think one thing that I would say is we've had students in what I think you would consider kind of traditional career technical opportunities such as home building that have gone on to then get 4-year degrees in construction management or gone on to do construction management at Kirkwood as well. So I think also one of the stigmas that we try to break down is if you're engaged in this sort of career training does not necessarily mean that it's not a 4-year path. In fact, some students that were not even on that path, especially with in some areas of agriculture and some other things that we have going on, they ultimately end up in a 4-year path. And so I think that's an informed decision, right? Like I've informed my decision. That's why I'm going to need a 4-year degree to do what I want to do, because I'm better informed.
Doug, can you talk about how you have built the Pathways program at Prairie. How have those programs expanded and built on each other?
Sure. So one of the things that we had a couple of very successful career tech pathways. One of them was our home building. But what we really looked at is we looked at where were our students going. The first pathway we really built was our agriculture academy. And when I tell people, I mean, we're 5 years into our ag program. We've now got, I think, the second or third biggest FFA program in the state. It's really looking at what is, and again, we're sitting right across the street from the #1 ag community college in the nation. And we didn't have students going over there. We didn't have them enrolling in that. Same thing with the culinary program. We sit right across the street from the Kirkwood Hotel, which has, fantastic culinary program, and our students weren't going there. So I think for us, it started with what are the opportunities our students aren't accessing, and how do we get them exposure to that? And really being targeted, because we're one school. We don't have, if in Cedar Rapids case, it makes a lot of sense to have, you're not going to be able to have all the same programs at every school, right? And that's the way that schools of that size and larger address the academy issue is making sure, this school is focusing on this, maybe this school's focusing on that. But as a one school district, we have to kind of be better, more specific generalists, right? And we have to target, what our community is needing and where our students tend to be going as well. And I can give you an example of a great apprentice opportunity, hopefully, that we develop in our area, which is just supply chain management and logistics. 50% of the freight in Iowa goes in and out of the Eastern Iowa airport. How do we engage in those types of long-term opportunities where a student's maybe not sitting around and thinking, I want to be a supply chain manager, but everyone orders and clicks the button and it comes the next day, sort of. So, how do you tap into those types of opportunities?
I've gotten to visit a lot of your CTE type pathways programming over the years, ag, nursing. What I loved was visiting your culinary program last year. You have a teacher who came to teaching after a long career in restaurants and very high scale restaurants. So I think something we could talk about also is how these pathways are bringing in passionate educators to schools who otherwise would not have seen themselves in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think that's a credit to the Board of Educational Examiners, and there's always been that value of career experience counting towards being able to teach at the college level. And Christy can speak to that quite a bit. How many thousands of hours or whatever. That hasn't really sometimes been as accepting, except in the last 5 years or so, with how to identify teachers to come in to the K-12 setting. With the licensure and those types of things. So. That's been really effective to us. Our culinary teacher graduated from Prairie High School, I think 25 years ago or something like that. Don't want to just put a date on that, but then worked in the industry. But he says, and I think this is where we can engage some of these passionate educators. He says that I was very much the student that you're targeting with these types of programs. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I'm supposed to go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to go to college for. So creating those targeted strategic college experiences, especially with our awesome partnership with Kirkwood, I think is an opportunity for us for sure.
And I would just absolutely agree. So about half of our career tech ed staff are former industry individuals. And so what they can bring to the classroom in terms of content knowledge, the workforce knowledge, and then the application of the learning has been fantastic. And that is in part to the Board of Educational Examiners making it a clear pathway for those interested in returning their passion.
Yeah, Christy, would you like to expand on that? How do you see that playing out at Kirkwood?
So we too hire folks from industry in the career and technical education area. Those faculty either need to have a degree in that area. It doesn't have to be a 4-year degree, or they have to have special training and so many hours of direct work experience, like Doug had mentioned earlier. So we do bring a lot of faculty on direct from industry. And in many cases, like previously mentioned, they are excited to share their time and talent. Many times they're taking a pay cut to leave industry and come and teach. When you look at the salary of what a nurse makes or someone in the automotive field, usually they might be taking a step backwards on the pay scale, but many of them are in a place in their career where they're ready to give back and help build that pipeline.
I just want to remind our audience, if you have any questions, please send them our way. We were talking earlier about how there's apprenticeship opportunities for people interested in becoming teachers. Are there other industries that are new to the apprenticeship model? And how are they seeing that as an effective way to train future workforce?
I would tell you that healthcare is newer to the registered apprenticeship model. They're really looking at, we had our jobs come out today, like the top jobs that have openings, and nurses is number one, and it always is. All healthcare is probably usually within 1 to 4 in our top jobs. And so they're looking at, how can they create an apprenticeship program within healthcare. So I would say that's one of the newer industries that have adapted it more and are really looking at how can they, kind of work out the kinks for a registered apprenticeship to work for them. But there's some really good models within this state that have been stood up and are moving forward. But we've had a lot of interest from healthcare providers on putting forward a registered apprenticeship in that area.
Christy, have you seen businesses who are interested in the apprenticeship model that haven't had a traditional apprenticeship before?
Not necessarily, we do have, we sponsor a few registered apprenticeship programs for high school graduates, more of the adult population. And they do seem to be pretty much in some of that traditional field. But like Georgia said, in addition to the nurse aide, we do have a certified medical assistant registered apprenticeship program, construction technologist, diesel mechanic. Maybe one of the newer ones that we've started is an electromechanical technician, but then we also have a HVAC installer and repairer apprenticeship program. So those are on the side of what we serve for the adult registered apprenticeship programs.
Ones that I could see increasing simply because I know we have had more internships within IT of any kind and helping students understand. So we have internships and a help desk technician, but then when you have data analytics and you build, and is it computer repair, is it software? And so we've been having more internships in varieties of computer science, information technology, because there is that general understanding that, knowing how to use Microsoft meant that was part of computer science, but really looking at the large picture of computer science and what that entails is starting to open more internships, which then I think would naturally lend themselves to that possibility of becoming a youth apprenticeship or leading into a registered apprenticeship.
Sure. I don't want to leave out artificial intelligence in this conversation. And I mean, that's permeating every career, right? So how are we preparing high school students and I don't know, business professionals for how the future of AI will impact their careers? And how is that adding to apprenticeships? Georgia, I don't know if you talk about that in your department.
Nope. We've talked about AI a lot. I mean, we talk about how AI is impacting just businesses in general and how that's going to impact their training and their need for upskilling within their companies. And we don't have a lot of assistance to help with that upskilling. But I think we've had a lot of conversations around that not necessarily around apprenticeships in general, but how is that going to impact the workforce of our existing industries? And how do we need to be thinking about being a better partner and finding ways that we can assist them as they're adapting AI within their companies? So we're having a number of conversations with with employers around the state to get a better idea of that, just in general from a training perspective in helping them. They're going to have a lot of upskilling that's needed within their companies, especially manufacturing.
I do think that AI is only as good as the input, right? So I think that one way that we've always been sort of preparing students is great written communication and being very clear, in the input, right? We had an industry panel at the beginning of the year that spoke to our teachers, and all of them had a different spin on how AI, and this was there was logistics, there was transportation there, city management was there, on how they're using AI. And we are, figuring out what is the best way to expose students to AI, what is the best way. And I think it's really what we've really started to lean into is, a lot of times they think you think of A and I, but there's a word in between that, which is artificial human intelligence. And so making sure that how do we as the humans interact with the artificial human intelligence and be critical consumers of that is a conversation that we have. I don't think it's impacting internships yet, because the local businesses that we've talked to, I think there's a draw to it. And a lot of times that draw is from a customer. Not necessarily sometimes within the company is kind of what we're hearing. So it really is, it's a conversation that we have. It's here, right? And it's here to stay. And so, but I think that conversation is ongoing in education. Maybe Cedar Rapids has it figured out. Tara?
No, we're same, right? As we're just learning along with, I think, at times and figuring that out.
Could you expand on that, Tara? Are you having conversations about AI and your CTE programs?
CTE programs, Grantwood AEA, I know, has been leading some teacher learning on AI. And then there are, I just saw an educator had requested an AI in the classroom. And so it's looking at it large picture. Our computer science teachers are delving into just learning more, is really what it comes down to. And then also, I'd seen some really cool things on AI and auto mechanics, but that was personal and just like helping students see that there will be continued learning, and that computers, and if they haven't started using their diagnostic scan tools, just how that is growing, but nothing where I would say, like, this is our absolute and we have it together. We're continuing to learn, and then also learning what it means for our technology department and how we go forth with everything there. So it is just a learning curve.
I think one of the things we're exploring, and we learned this from a speaker from the University of Iowa, is being really specific about, in this course, this is where you can use AI and this is where you cannot use AI, or that this is an appropriate use versus an inappropriate use. Because I think a lot of the academic conversation stems around the concern with cheating. And so approaching using AI in a way that's very specific is probably where our conversation is going with students. And then also exposing our teachers to it with kind of the goal of how do you get back some nights and weekends with this, but also knowing that it is a less than perfect scenario, and it's going every day, so like the photos with 6 fingers is now the misspelled word when you get it back. So you do have to be a very critical consumer of it.
Yeah, I was at that professional development conversation in your district, Doug, and I think what I really took away from that is this is just another tool that students are learning how to use, and you have to learn how to use that in the classroom, just like we learn how to use computers every day for our jobs. It's not about cheating necessarily. It's how can we learn how to use this to the best ability and to help us the most. Getting back more toward our apprenticeship conversation, what does it take for a company to launch an apprenticeship program? What's kind of required of them? I don't know, Christy or
I'm going to give you
Georgia.
the short answer. Yeah, there's a lot. So the short answer is to is to meet with our Office of Apprenticeship and our apprenticeship program coordinators, so that they'll be able to walk through any company, an organization step by step on developing and implementing a registered apprenticeship program, which is great for having our office, and we have several people who can do that, so they can just really work with companies and walk them through that process.
Yeah. We talked earlier about the importance of educating families about work-based learning opportunities. How young do students need to start considering this for it to be realistic for them?
Well, per Iowa code now, right, guys, I think it's starting now in 5th grade. Districts are supposed to start introducing the concepts of work-based learning. And as we said, it's a continuum. So what you do with the 5th grader is going to be much different than what you do or make available for, you know, a junior or senior in high school. But Doug and Tara, I would defer to one of you to provide more on that.
Yeah,
Would you like to?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you can go first, and I'll pick up on the other.
I think that, you know, building the structure, it's one of those rare things where you kind of got to build the structure from the top down, right? In terms of, and by top down, I mean what you're doing in high school, and then trying to align those exposures to make sure that it's aligned with what you're doing at that high school level, right? So our first focus was building those pathways and those academies, and now building that idea down into those other grades in a way where it doesn't come across as you're in 5th grade, you need to choose what you're going to work at the rest of your life, you know. And I think there's some adults that don't know that. And so how do you make sure that students, like I said before, it's difficult to dream about something you've never seen or you've never experienced. So a student's world in terms of the world of work is largely what they've seen, what their parents do, what their relatives do, maybe what their neighbors do. And so the start there is really to open up that option of, you know, within these different sectors, here's generally what people do in there. And then you start to see that agriculture is not just production agriculture. Agriculture is agribusiness. It's science. It's feeding the world, right? And so then you start to see where, okay, well, I don't grow up on a farm, but I can be involved in agriculture. Or aviation. So we're launching an aviation mechanic program. We have, which in partnership with Kirkwood, of course, I always give Christy that. She's very helpful with us with our crazy ideas. You know, but we have half the students that are in that program right now are really more on the engineering side of things, and about half are on the aviation mechanic side of things. So I think that comes from exposing people to that, you know, aviation is not just flying the plane. Or the ticketing gate, that there's those, and that's kind of what you try to do at those earlier ages, so that there's those aha moments. It's like, you know, this is something I like to do, but I can't see myself doing exactly that thing. That's a really vague answer. I apologize. I'm sure that Tara can narrow in that answer a little bit.
I don't know, Doug. I was going to start even. When we think about elementary school, right? You had guest speakers. You have people come in and talk about their careers, and really part of that is just when you're doing that, to look at the demographics of your students, and so to make certain that, and this is. Ties into like, how are we engaging all students? And so maybe it's a female mechanic coming in or a male nurse, but really like, how are we exposing students? Because elementary years, they know teachers, doctors, you know, something in the medical. But for some, like seeing the individual that's picking up the trash and they're outside every day and doing, you know, and being, and so helping students see, because when they're young, everyone has some of these huge dreams, and then we find like it kind of like they start to close themselves off because they maybe don't see themselves in it. And so, Doug, I know I'm not going smaller with that. I'm drawing upon yours too, but it really is like those sequential experiences that are laid out, and that ensuring that every student is having those opportunities to continue that exploration, and not have it be, yes, the question we've said, like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Mm-hmm. But just what do you want to do now that you're passionate about, that you can align, and you can see that there's classes, there's people in the community doing that. and making those connections. So it is that system. It's a continuum that we educate students, parents, and our staff on. And so that's a large picture of it's never too soon to talk about possibilities, but having that actual decision is much different than talking about possibilities.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
and Doug, I'll
ahead,
just
Susan.
reinforce. Oh, no, I was just going to say, Doug, I'll reinforce your comment from the beginning, because when I was a kid, my dad was a civil engineer, and people probably heard me tell the story, but we got to go land survey with him. And so I got to hold the range pole. And then as time went on, my dad said, well, you should think about being in engineering. And I'm like, no, because I don't want to hold a range pole, right? So kids only know kind of what they know. And so I think, getting them engaged, because had I looked into engineering more, I probably would have gone into something like industrial engineering, but I didn't, because all I thought about was that range pole. So I think it is, how do you get kids engaged early? And I would throw in another part of this. I mean, we all live in this state and our population is pretty stagnant. And so the earlier on that we can get kids excited about the opportunities that we have in the state of Iowa, the better off we're going to be about keeping them here. And so, I appreciate, that you touch with them early, and then they look at those different opportunities and hopefully move into something that's going to keep them here in Iowa.
I think that's what is such a huge misconception from families I hear from, is that they do see it as we're asking your child to choose a career at 14 years old. But it's about showing them the opportunities available to them right here in Iowa so that they can be successful, that they can make a salary with a livable wage, and have explored all their options before settling on something, and also building a resume of extensive skills so that they can choose something else if they want to change careers. A lot of people change careers, and that can be very hard, but maybe with these skills that they've learned in high school, they can make an easier jump from that. So I would love to expand on that. And with our last 5 minutes here, how are we preparing students for an apprenticeship? If it might be their first real job experience, what are those skills that they are getting in school?
One of the things that's a big goal in our next strategic plan that we launched this year is to lean into the competencies that our employers are saying our students need. And I think that that's always been kind of a delivery mechanism conversation. In other words, I'm going to deliver this skill and content in a collaborative way, or where we require some communication, rather than also the collaboration, that communication being the end result. And I may be getting a little bit too philosophical here, but I think, how do we measure those skills? Because when we talk to employers, it's really collaboration, self-management, the ability to work independently, the ability to solve problems, the ability to, manage conflict within themselves and within others. It's not just the conversations that probably I was having towards the beginning of my career, which is like, if you could just keep them off the phone and come to work, which is things that we've been working on the entire time as well. And so I think that that's really where I think we need to lean into, that will help enhance our students' readiness beyond, I've taken these classes and I've had these experiences. And so putting our students into those situations where they have to do that, where it's not kind of that traditional academic outcome or measured in that traditional way, in addition to making sure that they have literacy and numeracy. And again, I'm never going to say that that's not the most important thing we do, is creating literate students. But I think if we're talking about the and is really leaning into those interpersonal skills that our employers now are saying are more important than, hey, if they weld, that's good. I can teach them how to weld how I need them to weld. But what I can't teach them right off the bat is this. So can that be something that we focus on in schools? And I think that's the next phase for getting students ready for these experiences, and also earning those employer trusts so that we can expand those opportunities for students.
I would just say I agree with that. I know Kirkwood sends out, I don't know if it's biannually, like a work readiness type report on what businesses have reported as those skills. And Doug, it's exactly those, that professionalism and showing up and being an advocate and self-regulating.
I would also, I echo all that. And the thing that I appreciate about work-based learning, registered apprenticeships, whatever, all these opportunities, is it also gives students, if they're not already working, an opportunity to also hear that same thing from employers. You know, so parents can, you need to have better communication skills, or your teachers can tell you. But I think sometimes when you're hearing it from the people who at the end of the day are going to employ you, it's a different voice at the table. And sometimes they might pay a little bit more attention to that, and just knowing that, oh, okay, yeah, these are the skill sets that they're looking for. But we also have a survey, and it's the same thing, those employability skills, being able to have critical thinking, the communication, interaction, work in teams, and these opportunities that they're have the opportunity to be part of in the school and high school is just going to help them know what those expectations are when they get into the workforce.
Wonderful. Well, that concludes our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to our presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest, for their support. Thank you to our panelists for your insight and expertise, and to our audience for tuning in. Have a great Iowa Ideas.